Okay, and we are back on From Change to Change. I am DJ Bruja, aka Bruce Reilly, Deputy Director here at Voters Organized to Educate. We've got Devin Davis on the ones and twos, and today in the studio we have none other than Miss Tammy Savoie, who is running for office in District 23. And I've also heard someone call you Savoie.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to be clear, was that actually the right one?
Well, either one is correct. And if you're from Houma, Thibodaux, down by the Bayou of Savoie.
Okay.
And that's correct. And if I go down there, I'm certainly going by Savoie.
Okay.
And but I grew up here in New Orleans. In school and everything, it's Savoie.
Okay. All right. So give us a little sense of, I know a few things, but share with people kind of where you're coming from and why you got into this race here.
Okay. So born and raised in New Orleans. So, I love our city. I love our new little district that we have. And so growing up here, it was always, wonderful with my grandparents and siblings and extended family. And when I got older, I joined the military. And there's a long road to joining the military. First, I was in the Louisiana Air National Guard and got my education at University of New Orleans. I went to Dominican High School for everybody out there. Okay. And got a couple of degrees at the University of New Orleans while I was in the Air National Guard. And that's how I funded my way through school, was through the Air National Guard, and then I worked out at the base in Belle Chase. So I worked nights and would get off. I worked 11 to 7 kind of shift, get off, get to school for 8 o'clock, go to school till 3, and then go back to work at 11. I did that until I got my bachelor's degree, and then I got jobs at school when I got my master's. But then I got a fellowship and scholarships to Emory University in Atlanta. I was still in the Guard during that time, and I became a clinical psychologist. And then I decided, and I was still like a technical sergeant when I was finishing my degree, I decided to go on active duty. And I went on active duty, and I went from technical sergeant to a captain, which was great. And I did clinical work for a while, and then I went into research, acquisition, and medical operations. So it's a wide variety. Then I came back home. Okay, so I served during the wars, and that was quite the experience. I loved serving the country. I was all over the
To clarify, we're talking Iraq and Afghanistan?
Yes, Iraq and Afghanistan. And so that was my honor and my privilege to serve our country and to represent our country. And very big part of my life. It was basically most of my adult life. And came back home, and of course New Orleans has always been home base. My family's here. We'd always come here. Graduations, marriages, birthdays, everything like that. And so when I came back home, getting involved in Louisiana and New Orleans and seeing the state of our state, the state of our city, I was pretty disheartened about the whole thing. And I decided, I wasn't ready to retire, and I really wanted to continue to serve. And so I decided to get involved, and I did. And I ran against Steve Scalise, was the first candidate. And just started advocating at the Capitol and different advocacy groups. Part of my history, or part of my educational background, is maternal and infant health care, so I started advocating for that. Not understanding, when I was gone and involved in my military career, I really didn't understand, what we were fighting for in Afghanistan, the poor conditions of women. And right here in Louisiana, we have this extremely high rate of infant and maternal mortality rates, and just clinical outcomes in general for women and babies are really bad in the state. And so that was a huge issue for me.
What do you think are the reasons for the bad outcomes for infant mortality rate?
Well, it's very complicated. It's not just infant mortality, because that's
And mothers.
And mothers, but it's also preterm birth weights and preemie babies, or low birth weight and preemie babies, which is a much bigger problem than the infant mortality, which is a huge problem. But a lot of it is just prenatal care. Okay, mothers not getting prenatal care that they need, not having access to obstetrical care, which is only going to be made worse by the recent laws that were passed against abortion care, because now women can't get care for complicated pregnancies. So it's gotten much worse and projected to get much worse. So not having access to care, structural racism, a distrust of the medical system, and general not educating our young women about what they need and how, sex education, prevention of unplanned pregnancies and things like that. So it starts very young,
Right.
and it kind of goes through women's health all the way up through their early childbearing years up until the point that we can no longer give birth, basically.
Do you think the petrochemical industry has anything to do with it?
Well, certainly in those areas, yes, because we have this, we have Cancer Alley, and we have all of the, one of the high things in Louisiana is birth defects due to when you have premature births, which petrochemical industry contributes to the preemies and the low birth weight. Okay, this is a very significant factor. And so if you look at that area and you can map this out, that we have high rates of premature babies, with low birth weight, and that leads to disabilities, intellectual, physical disabilities that carry through with these children throughout their lives. And so it's an enormous burden on the babies and their moms and the families and then the communities, and it just expands. So a family that has to care for a preterm baby versus a healthy full-term baby, the difference is staggering. So the health care for a healthy normal baby, the first year is about $5,000. For a baby that's preterm or low birth weight, it's about $45,000. And then if they don't have insurance or Medicaid, it's the family takes that on. And of course, caring for somebody like that, a baby like that, the mother often cannot go back to work. So that further increases the financial and emotional stress on the family.
A lot of people would say in this state, and we're probably going to hear a lot of it over the next 4 or 8 years, that the cost of having jobs is to have low birth weight babies, developmental disabilities, high crime rate because of all the pollution that all these jobs create.
Oh yeah, the cost of having those jobs.
Right,
well,
and so people are going to say
if you
want a clean environment, people are going to say you hate jobs, you hate industry.
No, that's crazy. Because first of all, we have the opportunity right now to create a green economy, especially in Louisiana, with the resources that we have, with the sun, with the rain, with the water. We have the resources to transition our economy. We just don't have the political will to do that, okay? And right now we have abundant jobs, okay? We have this situation in our state, and let's just talk about our state, where we have low unemployment, okay? But people still can't afford to live, okay? So these wonderful jobs that somebody might be talking about from the petrochemical, they're not available to everybody. And those particular jobs are not the jobs that we want to see created. But having a job is not enough, okay, right now, because we have jobs available, but it's not enough to get a house, get an apartment, okay, have transportation, have food, have medical insurance, have utilities, the basics. That's just the basic, having that roof over your head with utilities, with food to eat, with, transportation to get to your job. And, nothing about clothes and getting, transportation to school. So it's just like there are jobs available, but they still don't pay enough for families to access what they have. So having a job is not, especially in the petrochemical industry, is not really the answer to solve preterm and preemie and low weight baby crisis that we have, and that's just not the answer at all.
I can tell you that it's so frustrating to hear people talk about crime and public safety. Now there's a violent crime task force that's happening, which is really a stacked deck of individuals who I think have a similar way of thinking, but none of them are talking about the environment, which creates disabilities, which then leads people, into having a hard time with education and poverty and then crime. And as someone who just got his window smashed in on Friday, it's going to cost me about $700. We're all open to being the next person.
Right, exactly.
But like if I had a more stable city where people were, like you said, could afford their bills and and make it through school and have like a sense of hope, my window probably wouldn't have got smashed.
Yeah.
But instead someone might think that if we were to catch the person who did that and put them away for a life without parole even, that person will never smash another window. But I'm not convinced that my window won't get smashed again.
It'll get smashed again, and that young person that's incarcerated right now is going to get out, and we don't want them smashing more windows. You know, we want them to get the help that they need, and we want them not to smash windows in the first place. So, to give a kind of an outline of a plan, we really have to tackle it from several different angles. Okay, so to start with our baby crisis, okay, and our infant mortality and preemie and low birth weight baby crisis, we can start there with helping moms, okay, and making sure that they get the care, the nutrition, and you know, care is much cheaper too. Prenatal care is about $2,000 to $5,000 during the course of a pregnancy, and that involves. I know I'm going into the weeds on this, but that involves getting a prenatal vitamin every day, which is about $7, $10 a month. It involves seeing an obstetrician or a midwife, a doula, once a month until the pregnancy, unless there are complications. And then as you get closer, seeing them every other week until you get closer to the delivery. And having a delivery plan and also making sure this mom is getting good nutrition. You know, that's basic. If we can do that, we can basically cut our preemie care in half. So that's what we want to do there. And then if we can do that, it will lessen the roles of children that need specialty care as infants all the way up to school. So our Early Steps program, grossly underfunded, and we have Early Steps, we have Early Head Start, and those Head Start's a federally funded program, but still we could reduce the need.
How is that such a hard pitch on a state where so many people say that they're pro-life and they care about the children?
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you, when I was running against Scalise, this is a pat answer. So I'm running and I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, this is a problem in the state with our babies. And well, I'm doing good. We're doing good here, so I don't need that. That's why would I want to pay for that when actually?
Well, because you're forcing other people to have babies.
I know.
Oh, right,
but that's the mentality. So we really have to get out of the mentality. If I'm okay, I don't care about anybody else. If my life is okay, then why should I spend my tax money on somebody else that has needs? Not realizing that that's just grossly irresponsible and just inhumane. But that will come back on you in the form of, high crime rates, okay? Money that we can't spend on infrastructure, money that we can't spend on education, things like that. So if you have that attitude that if my life's okay, I don't have to contribute because I'm doing okay, then it'll come back to you. You may not realize in what ways, but, we all pay for choices like that. Yeah. Okay?
I think that's also just like part and parcel to having so many millionaires representing, in government. Like Congress, as we know, is something like about 90%. If you didn't start as a millionaire, you'll be a millionaire soon because someone wants to make you a millionaire. Yeah. And then in this state, so many people are like lawyers from the elites, etc., to get to a place where they can amass a war chest or feel like they've got like this institutional support. And that kind of gets me to this question about, so you're a Democrat, dyed in the wool, I guess, right?
As you can see.
Yeah, you ran against Stephanie Hilferty in District 94. You've been on the state Central Committee. Voted for the chair last time, correct? Katie Bernhardt, in the wake of Karen Carter Peterson going to prison. So a rough stretch. And then with everything that we've been hearing about, supporting or not supporting Sean Wilson and all this, is the party dead? Is Katie Bernhardt the wrong person for the job? I mean, what's kind of been your take on where we're at with the Democratic Party?
Well, I really think we should have supported Sean much more. We had a chance. I don't know. I was busy with my race, so I don't know what happened at the state. But I know that traditionally the state has not supported candidates. Okay, just the lack of support for state candidates, down ballot, and the candidate. Although John Bell got
I was going to say, John Bell Edwards had a lot of people, a lot of money. Mary Landrieu spent about $5 million, I think, on her last campaign.
That does not trickle down to down ballots. Just doesn't. And that's a problem. And that was a problem under Karen Carter Peterson and her executive committee, and also a big problem under Katie as well. And then I don't know why Sean didn't get the support he needed. But
I read that they spent
was
$28,000 on his campaign.
And maybe because they didn't have any, I don't know.
We spent far more than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't involved in that, and I think it's atrocious, and I think we blew a shot that we had. And so I don't think the party needs to be dismantled again. You know, after Karen Carter Peterson and the whole debacle that was, everybody that was on the DSCC decided we just need to get a clean slate. And I think that's what ushered Katie in the new regime. That has not worked. And we need to clean house again until we grow a party that can, really support Democratic candidates from the top all the way to the bottom, and not.
Yeah. And for those that are wondering, to be clear, if you haven't figured out, we are entirely independent here at Voters Organized to Educate. It does so happen that a lot of our values align with a lot of Democrats, but not all Democrats. And sometimes with some Republicans, certainly not all Republicans. And so for us, it's always been a bipartisan effort,
Right.
or a nonpartisan effort, whatever you want to see it as. But I'm just like,
Yeah, we have
it's really frustrating about what happened with the Democrat. And what would be the process? I've heard some gossipy type answers of like how to change over the Democratic Party. And you don't have to share if any like private tea or anything.
Yeah, I'm not in.
But like, would you vote for Katie Bernhardt again if she were to run for?
No, that's not going to happen, and I don't think that's going to happen on so many levels. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. It looked like, to me, from an outsider perspective, it looked like a fail from the start. It was like someone
there
she
was
had no experience in campaigning.
Besides that, there was a whole group of people set out to undermine her from the beginning. And so when you elect somebody, you really need to get behind that person to try to make them successful. That didn't happen either. So there was a group of people who decided, no, we're going to do everything we can to make Katie unsuccessful, okay? And so she didn't really get a fair start. Now, not to say she didn't make missteps, and some serious missteps.
Oh my God!
But
we won't get it. Like, we can leave Katie alone.
Yeah.
This is not a Katie Bernhardt bashing session, but it's been really surprising as someone who's been working on politics and elections for decades. Just to see like the trajectory that's happened, and then the lack of leadership from the top. I mean, we still live in a Democrat governor state, a Democrat mayor state, and there was no turnout events. There was no like throwdown party kind of thing. But anyway, let's get back to Tammy Savoie running for District 23. I know one question that a lot of people have, that a few people, were asking me about in terms of like redistricting, and because we like look under the hood, know all the detailed rules. So you don't currently live in the District 23, and the rule is that you have a year when a new district is created. You have a year to move into it.
Yeah, let's explain that. So in creating the new district, the legislators took precincts from District 91, 93, 94, and 97. Okay, so anyone living in those 4 districts can run for office. And that's so the legislators can't legislate out or, gerrymander out specific people. I mean, the law is created to be fair. And so it's a fair law. And so anybody can run. And so I ran because I'm very tied into Mid-City. That was part of the district that I ran for in 94, and that's part of the district I ran for in the congressional race as well, against 2 Republicans. So I am running again because I feel committed to this, and I'm not giving up. When I got off.
So if you picked out your spot, if you win this race,
I'm not getting ahead of myself, but I know what I have to do.
You don't have your bags packed just yet.
I do not. So we'll address that hopefully when we get to it. Hopefully.
Okay.
So
Let's talk a little about with District 23. We all kind of come and go through District 23. Obviously, Mid-City, it's the middle of the city.
It is the heart of the city.
We can debate that. You hear people on the West Bank, they'll tell you all about Gretna and Algiers being the heart of the area, whatever. But at any rate, I live in the quarter. And so there's always a lot of change, economic sort of stuff, buildings change. Obviously, Katrina did a number on Mid-City. And I could see something like the old medical center down Bienville and Norman Francis, and just be like, what's ever going to happen with that? But are there any particular projects that you think need to happen, or things that need to be stopped?
Well, I'm excited about some of the projects that have happened. Now, we have the biomedical district that has been around for a little while, but I'm very excited about that, and I know some people are skeptical about it, but I think if we have the transparency we need, it could be a really good thing. So one of the things I did on active duty was I was a program manager at a what is similar. It's a center of excellence, basically, which is what we want to create here, where we have centers of excellence for different medical specialties. Okay, so what we would do in the district would go all across the two-lane corridor, and it would involve our medical centers, which we have great resources here. Okay?
Billions of dollars.
And
the most high making profit tier things in the country, I believe, are healthcare, like pharmaceuticals and hospitals.
And I have another issue with the medical industrial complex. But if we're talking about becoming centers of excellence, okay, we can really lift up everybody in that corridor, basically District 23, through, we rely on the service sector a lot here, okay, for jobs. And we need to bring high-paying, quality jobs here that require some skill level. And this would be, medical skill level, but also medical devices, medical research, pharmaceuticals, things like that. And I met with a lot of people during the campaign. I met with the Odyssey House. One thing, we know Louisiana and New Orleans and St. Tammany and some other parishes have problems with opioid addiction. Well, I met with folks from the Odyssey House. I said, are y'all involved in the bio district? And I'm like, no. I'm like, okay, so what are the program offices are going to be, or will they be for this program, for this biomedical district? And I have some ideas about that. One could be an addictions center of excellence, because we have the resources here, and we have the VA clinic here, we have the Odyssey House. One can be a geriatric center of excellence, because we have an elderly population that needs that here. But we also have the new nursing facility, and we have a dearth of geriatric providers right now, and we have a growing geriatric population. So what we would do is create the center and bring providers in, or have, all of the accompanying medical centers, whether that's LSU, Tulane, Xavier with their pharmacy program, and now the nursing program, contributes a full-time equivalent person to run a program office. But we need a geriatric center of excellence, maternal and infant health care. We could, because we have so much problems, we could become a center of excellence here to say, okay, let's first solve our own problems, bring specialists in. And we know how to do that, or, I've done that with program.
Maybe that's great that you've done it in the military, federal structure, and the
the
top-down
structure's
sort of follow
already
commands.
in.
My question to anyone here in Louisiana, I was
But
actually
we can
just
create
reading.
that here.
Well, I wonder
I truly believe it.
You
You
know-
have to be optimistic that we have this resource here.
we wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't optimistic. But
And-
it's like
and
trying to
we have-
identify some of the challenges.
The
is-
challenges are great, but nothing that can't be overcome.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know their master plan is supposed to be due 1 November. Okay, that's around the corner. I don't know if it's going to be the master strategy plan, and they're supposed to present it to the legislature. So, and this is a state, municipal, and private enterprise. Okay, so everybody gets in on it, and then the district benefits considerably from it in many different ways.
Well, regular folks are going to wonder, like with projects like that, which are state, private, local, whatever. It's like, well, are regular folks going to benefit? And hear me out. So, for instance, the because of a lawsuit by the DOJ where Louisiana uses old folks' homes for mental health care too much, Louisiana was under a lot of pressure to comply to create some mental health services. And so this one provider, for instance, was trying to do from like Covington, I believe it was, also stuff in Lafayette. But, as they said in their thing, their goal is to make profit. And they had a hard time staffing up and keeping it open 24/7, which was the goal. There was like multi-parts of this mental health kind of like street outreach and everything else. And it was just clear to me, just reading a basic article, it was like almost like I've seen this movie before, where the government says we have to do this thing. We give money to someone who needs to make profit off of it. Then they try to do it and make their profit. They're more focused on profit than the thing. And then eventually they turn away when they've got enough profit. And then the government's back in square one being like, we just spent like $30 million and we're back at square one. So like, if we have to provide a service, A, why do we have to run it through a profit generating machine first? And then B, when we're trying to bring in things like hospitals or petrochemical companies, like, isn't Formosa like the second biggest refinery or something or whatever in like the world?
We're not trying to bring that in.
But well, we bring these things in, we give all these, like, here's a free road. Here's a 10-year tax break.
Yeah.
Here's everything. And then we just send it. So, like, if a hospital moves in, what's the payoff for the community?
Okay, yeah, well, let's not conflate the petrochemical industry.
But to me, it's all the same thing. Okay. It's like, you know, jobs, high-paying jobs is like the sell. Because, like, I'm not getting something
not
from...
jobs, not the sell. The sell is the services that would be generated, too. If we create a geriatric center of excellence where we have a dearth of geriatric providers, then our geriatric population is going to benefit, right? And then that will uplift the community.
Well, if they have insurance, like the way the whole healthcare system is set up.
I get that, okay?
Yeah.
But this is the issue, is just like, okay, we need to identify the barriers and then knock those barriers down, okay? Because if you have Medicare, if geriatric folks have Medicare, they will have services, okay? And what we need to do is, as much as possible, take the profit end out. Okay, so for the businesses along the two-lane corridor that this is going to create, the coffee shops, the gift shops, the everything like that, they can generate their profit. But, you know, when it comes to medical care, I'm for reducing, you know, have providers get paid, but they not generate, you know, this is not a business where you're going to generate megatons of profit and you're going to have a decent living, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we have to go with this, and you know we need to change the script and just say, okay, how are we going to do this differently? Let's look at the obstacles we're going to face and start it off small and then grow it. You know, we're not going to just plan it and it's going to be huge right off the bat. So we create a couple of small program offices. We do a little bit of renovation. And we move from there, and we learn each time we create a program like this. We kind of grow and learn from there. But that's
I definitely believe in sort of creating a little bit of the beta model. You know, First 72 Plus, a reentry program created by people in this building.
right.
You know, as a way to show this is how you do reentry. We have the Diamond House behind us for women. Same type of thing. Like, let's start small and improve the concept. So
and the alternative is, what do we do? Nothing?
No.
Okay.
So
to do differently, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But to do nothing is not an option.
No.
And then the neighbors are very involved with this. You know, for the last year, I've been very involved in the Mid-City Neighborhood Organization. They are very involved in this. There's a couple of lawyers there. Susan Hall, I think that's her last name. But, you know, that have actually gone through and said, okay, we're really worried about the housing there, and are people going to be displaced? Well, they got the houses that might have been displaced taken out of the bio district so that they're not going to be displaced. So that's one of the things that we want to create, affordable housing within the biomedical district. But if you're already in the biomedical district, you don't want your house to be confiscated or usurped and taken for federal state lands or anything like that. So the involvement of the people in this process is essential. And the very good thing is that we have a very involved population, and you know, because people love their neighborhood. And so the goal is to always include the neighborhoods, people in the process, and get feedback, and so that as we develop it, as it develops, it's going to benefit people, and they will have a stake in it, so that it will be theirs and they will own it, versus this being thrust upon them as well. So I think that's real important, and I think that we can do it.
So bringing it to something that, you know, I know is like, you know, near and dear to your specialty with mental health, as we know, in New Orleans, they're trying to build $110 million mental health expansion to the jail, to which phase 3, to which the zoning board had hearings. I think the last go round, there was about 240 public comments against building this, and there was 0 for. And yet the zoning committee, they split the vote, but they sent it along to the city council, who then didn't vote on it. So then the city, from the mayor's office, decided to give themselves a permit without going through the process, and say that, well, the federal judge ordered us to build it. And I guess more to the point, besides the fact that it doesn't seem like democracy is working in that situation, bringing it back to just mental health care, something that you've provided definitely on the individual level, correct? But have you had to sort of design out something like bigger, like in the war zone of, I'm sure, like soldiers? Tell us a little bit about how you would like provide some really traumatic care for a group of people.
Okay, so what we did in the military, the military has to provide care all over to the force levels, to the forward operating bases, to the combat operating bases. And so, and we do that. And how we did it, we had battlefield rotations where we had teams consisting of a psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, mental health tech, and sometimes the whole team went out, sometimes some people in teams went out, but we have them stationed at different places, and then they go out and they do their initial assessments, and then also do telephone assessments, and then go out by helicopter is what we were using. And so when I was at the Pentagon, okay, so we did, we always are assessing the plans we put in place. So we went out as a team, as a joint team, to assess what we were doing. And so we went out and we went to the forward operating bases, and we saw what they were doing. We talked to the teams, see if they had the resources they needed and things like that. And we, wrote our report. These are the discrepancies we found, and these are the fixes we think would help. And then they were implemented, and then we reassessed. Okay, so after I left the Pentagon, I went to the operational side of the base, and I went back out to places in the Middle East, and I saw how they were working. And it was really, because we wrote the regulations then based on the report that we did. So it was interesting to see the regulations in place and how they were being implemented, because sometimes the interpretation, as you get into implementation, changes. And you do staff assistance visits and things like that. And so when we implement things, so we need mental health resources in the state, and there's a dearth of providers. So we can do something to that effect, where we have hubs of teams, okay? And they can go out and reach out to, in New Orleans, we're good. It's more about access than it is about having the providers in place. But to the places that don't have providers, have hubs that go out and see people, and then follow up with telehealth, and then go out and things like that. And that works very well. But we would have to design it for for Louisiana, and we would have to have the follow up to that. And that, up front it costs money, okay, but in the long run you save money because people are getting the health care they need and the mental health care they need. And basically they also stay out of trouble, and they are less stressed, so their families are better off. And so anytime you can reduce stress, and whether that is financial stress, economic, environmental stress, or interpersonal stress, anything like that, you reduce the mental health burden. Okay, so what we want to do is having access reduces stress right off the bat. And if you can make that access available, you do. So I would use every available experience that I had to implement mental health strategies and medical strategies, because you can do the same thing with medical health. We did the same thing with medical care. I was more involved in the mental health side in that particular adventure. So
I think a lot of people, like globally, and even just some folks that I know who are a little less engaged in politics, but they hear about this and that here, as it comes. Obviously right now the Israel Gaza situation is educating a lot of people, and a lot of folks are realizing, like, growing up in Gaza is this like daily institutionalized sort of family intergenerational stress. There's kids that were born in rubble, and now they're in rubble again as like teenagers. But bringing it back to New Orleans, as we know, there's people that are born in poverty. There's people who are born in Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
And so we have this like broad base of trauma that a lot of folks are not acknowledging because maybe, as you said earlier, well, I'm okay.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We have a city of trauma here. Okay, our kids just grow up in the heart of trauma, and we have to really intervene to do something about it. And if we don't, it's not going to get any better unless we actively do something. So, and every year, come hurricane season, we're all, like, is this going to be the big one?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to suffer this again. And so we really have to do something. Now, the poverty that kids grow up in, now that is a legislative choice. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we know that if we did certain things, we could reduce childhood poverty. We did that during the pandemic, okay? So the first thing that we can do is raise the minimum wage. Of course, with inflation, that it's been in the past, it's not as bad right now, but $7.25 doesn't cut it. When I got back from the military, it was $7.25. We were fighting for it then. We're still fighting for it. So the U.S. Senate has proposed an $11 a year an hour raise at the federal level. That would automatically increase Louisiana's. If we don't, I'm hoping that we have some legislators, this would take Republicans to see the need for an increase, which would reduce poverty. It would reduce childhood poverty. The child tax credit as well. Now, when we expanded the child tax credit during the pandemic, it reduced child poverty to 5.2%, the lowest that it's been post World War. And then recently, they took it away. They stopped the expansion of the child tax credit. The childhood poverty rose to 12-point-something%. Okay, this is a legislative choice.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we have people like Senator Manchin saying, "Well, I don't know how poor people are going to spend that money." And what we know is that during the pandemic,
on food, maybe.
Yeah, food, housing, shelter, school supplies, and clothes. This is what people spend discretionary fund or extra fund. It's not even discretionary. These are basic
and
needs.
Actually boost the overall economy more than anything.
Exactly, because they go out and they spend
it
money.
at stores that need the business.
Exactly. So this is a legislative choice. Now, a handful, about 12 or 13 states have gone to state child tax credits. Most of them are blue states, but a couple, Idaho and I think Oklahoma, either Oklahoma or Kansas, has also decided they need a child tax credit. We should do that. Okay, that's a legislative thing. The state legislature can do.
Yeah.
Next session, boom.
They seem to keep people in poverty. I mean, as you said, it's a choice, and the reality is we have so many Fortune 500 companies here. We have this huge port. We have the Mississippi River. We have New Orleans. Like in Alaska, the oil companies pay everybody. I think it's like $2,000, man, woman, and child, and baby, as like a kickback. Here, the kickback is mesothelioma or lung cancer.
Exactly, and so that's a horrible thing, and we just really need to keep fighting the petrochemical companies and kind of try to get them out of Louisiana if possible, but at the very least have them reduce their production of CO2 and other petrochemicals and pay for the health care of all of these individuals that are sick from them, restore the land, and a whole host of reparations that they need to do.
Yeah, and just coming back to mental health for a minute, only because you're a provider, and we don't always get a chance to talk to people who've actually done sort of one-on-one treatment. So, the $110 million jail, bunch of cells, not any operation cost, doesn't pay for a single therapist, doesn't pay for
terrible. And
anything.
The way it's set up is detrimental to your mental health. Well, being incarcerated is detrimental.
And I'm just wondering, because when I hear all this stuff, it's like, okay, let's talk about mental health. Like, what is your staffing structure, your like appointment structure, your like workshop structure? Like, if you were to build out a plan and you wanted $110 million from me, I'd be like, I need more than it's a building.
Yeah, right.
But like, can you give people, and for those that don't, I did 12 years in prison. I saw a lot of mentally struggling people, and I had a few times where I was struggling for a stretch, but I know the people that are in the chronic serious, and I'm like, other than give people Thorazine and have them shuffle around until they get released, what can you do for somebody who's stuck in some really structurally oppressive scenarios and who may have gone through who knows what kinds of trauma that got them there, or developmental disabilities behind, maybe they ate the lead paint or whatever,
right,
you know,
exactly.
and so all the things that go into it. So you put someone in a cage, and let's just say you spend $1 bazillion a year on each individual patient. What can you do?
Well, that's the question, because you're creating the disorder that you're treating, okay? So the answer would be not to create the disorder or exacerbate the disorder that you're treating. So the answer is not to build that structure, okay? Because you're just, contributing to the mental health issues that you're treating. And so it just doesn't make any sense. So the thing to do would be to, and it's kind of like in this particular situation, the medical industrial complex along with the prison industrial complex have come together.
Yeah, capitalism at its finest.
To make this huge profit off of these really unfortunate individuals.
Yeah, they're just moving chairs around the deck of the Titanic.
And it's
making money off of it.
It's really terrible. And so I would say, let's not build it, let's not build it, let's not build it. And what else can we do instead? Let's start from scratch here. And how can we decarcerate? How can we move people that have not committed a violent crime into rehabilitative facilities so that we move to a more restorative, rehabilitative justice system versus a punitive justice,
Well, I'm glad you brought up a lot of times we have this bifurcation of like violent crime, non-violent crime, right? And this understanding that, violent crime is sort of like beyond the pale. And violent crime technically incorporates a lot of things where there's actually no physical harm done, but it's still counted as a violent crime. But one would think that people who may have committed violence and harmed someone need rehabilitative services more than anybody.
Well, they would, especially, like I said, they need rehabilitative. Maybe they need to be, incarcerated longer or, more services, whatever. But public safety, and I don't want to discount public safety and the whole gun situation, it's another situation, but public safety is on everybody's mind. People want to be safe in their neighborhoods and in their city, and everybody deserves to be safe. But people who traumatize are often traumatized themselves, and so they would need a lot of treatment, okay? But people who've not committed violent crimes, okay, not harmed anybody, and or obviously ill, mentally ill, more restorative, rehabilitative treatment. Okay.
Yeah, last session, Representative Villio had a bill where it was like basically your fourth time, like start throwing away the key, right? And, just taking it objectively, okay, maybe there's some logic there if you don't really deep dive and you're like, okay, you've kind of like 3 strikes, you're out. Well, 4 strikes, you should be like super out or something. But she made this comment that I thought was really interesting. And whether it was an honest comment or a cynical comment or whatever, she had said, people need to stay in there longer so they can benefit more for the treatment. But if you know that there's no treatment.
Yeah, that's kind of a joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's, especially in the jails, right? So you can languish in jail for a long time. There are no treatments in jail. Maybe the prisons have a little bit better treatment services, but
like in my understanding and experience, the people that are on like their 4th crime, to get there, usually at least 2 or 3 they're on like their 6th or 7th. They're low-level crimes that keep occurring, and they keep occurring for a reason, and they're usually either, like you're saying, attached to mental health or to addiction, or, as we know, a lot of times those things are linked.
Right.
And sometimes there's no other person impacted than yourself, or you're where someone says you're not supposed to be.
Well, and the folks that are committing the low-level crimes are going to jails, okay? Local jails where it's a kind of you drop them off and throw away the key for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and they don't get services there. They might get an AA meeting or something like that, but they're not getting services in jail. So the idea that, if you commit a low-level crime, you go to jail for 2 or 3 years, you get out, after 2 years, you commit another crime, you go in for 2-3 years, and and you're just not getting any treatment at all. So that's where also we have to change in our local jails, where most of the people stay, not prisons. Most people don't go to state prisons. Most people stay in state jails. I mean, in local jails. For years and get out, come back, and that's where the recidivism rate is.
Do you think
that's where we need treatment?
Yeah, and not to say everything's an either or, but from a broad standpoint, to do that, either we've got to massively raise the, because right now it's about $28 a day that the local sheriff gets from the state fund to house that person. $28. Obviously, there's some cheap food. You're paying staff for a building that's there, so you either got to jack that up to do services maybe to like $56, and the justice reinvestment, actually a lot of money went to sheriffs to do these reentry programs. How well they work or not is a different conversation, but so the idea is send more money to the sheriffs or repatriate those people back into state custody because they're state convicted and a state prisoner, and there is space in the state prisons. So do we keep subsidizing the local sheriffs and their jobs program, or do we bulk up the state prisons? I mean, which one do you think is more either reasonable or doable?
Well, keeping people closer to home, I think, is always better, because family can come and visit, community, they can stay attached. But then we really need to bulk up the services in our state local prisons, or jails, basically. And I think that's the thing. I think investing in people before they get to jail is the thing to do. The money that we spend, $100,000 plus per inmate versus $12,000 per student. Move some of that money to education and make sure that we get these kids educated, get them jobs, get them the services they need, so that they don't end up in holding cells, because that's what jails are at this point, is holding cells. So I think that I would rather, if I had my druthers, keep people close to home, okay? Keep people close to their community, close to their family, and do the rehabilitation close to home, so that we have work release programs where they can get a job before they get out, go to work, come back, integrate with their family and their community while they're incarcerated, if we're going to keep people incarcerated. And that integration becomes easier the closer it is that people are.
And we've got I don't have the numbers in front of me, I apologize, but I believe it's over 100, maybe it's a couple hundred people from Mid-City who are currently incarcerated, who have families, presumably mostly in Mid-City, but as we know, people move, around the area, who are in places all the way up in Monroe area, Allen Parish, Wynn Parish. Angola obviously is about a 3-hour drive for families to get up there.
Yeah, it's really hard.
And so
that's why
we don't have people at the local jail here, and I don't think anyone's really pushing for that, which, previously for the sheriffs was a big source of, we had 6,000 people in our jail, and it was a big source of revenue to keep people in with a daily rate. So the jails have always been a money-making enterprise for some people. But if you were representing District 23, and presumably representing also that 100 or so people in those families who are incarcerated, would you be pushing the DOC to increase their budget to provide these types of services? If you looked at it and said, this is just bare bones for 26,000 people, or if you add in the jails, we're talking 40,000 people.
We would need those resources. The more we are wasting human capital, human resources, when we lock people up and don't provide the resources. And then we still pay for them to be housed and to be clothed and everything. And we're not doing ourselves any service. The whole inhumanity of it is the thing that we have to address. But if you want to talk about economics, it economically doesn't make any sense either. And then people get out and they don't have the resources to get back on their feet. And so we need to do something different and better.
A lot of people would say that's intentional.
Well, yeah, because like I said, and I've said this many times, as long as money is involved and somebody's making a profit over keeping people in jail, then they want those jail cells to be full.
Yeah.
And it's like the for-profit prisons. It's the craziest idea, because the only way you're going to make a profit is if you imprison people. And so you don't want those jail cells to be empty. And so what do? You go out and create convicts so you can imprison them. And so it's a bizarre and terrible idea to have for-profit prisons.
Yeah, and even just, I mean, realistically, like if you work for the sheriff's department, it's a state agency or a parish agency, but like you're part of the profit, But so one of the dents in those profits across the country over the last 10, 15 years that some have fought vigorously has been the slow but steady legalization of marijuana. And here we are in Louisiana, where sometimes people drive around and they're not even sure what the law is, because it's like you have a sign that seems to look very similar to like Colorado or something. But the bigger picture, where our state is at with medical and everything else, and sort of decrimming the small possessions.
Yes.
I mean, where do you think we're going in the next 4 years on this issue?
Well, hopefully we will decriminalize and also make the laws clearer. Just having paraphernalia in your car will get you a sentence. Okay, and you may not know that. So people, you can have a roach clip in your car, and if somebody at a cop wants to pull you over and do his thing.
Do people still use roach clips?
I don't know. I can't tell you that, okay? But
I do recall the roach clip once, but
long ago.
I think for us, when I was a kid, it was literally like something you stole from science class. There was like a little connector or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't know. But anyway, so we really have to make the laws clear. But we're going toward decriminalization and making sure that. So I personally think we should decriminalize, regulate it to make sure it's pure, make sure people know what they're getting, and then tax it and use the tax money for treatment and research.
Yeah.
And make sure that people also now, as a psychologist, I know people can get addicted to cannabis, and we need to make sure that people are educated and say, okay, it's not like opioids. You're not going to get addicted very fast, and it's not going to, take over your life most of the time. But it can make people very, complacent, and just all they want to do is sit around and smoke pot. But so we have to be aware of that, and we can't go around saying, oh, there's no harm to this drug at all.
There's harm from McDonald's too.
Exactly. But I'm all for regulating, taxing, and using the taxes to benefit our city and our state. And I think we're moving in that direction. And the other thing is just the fairness of how these laws are still being implemented. And if you read them, and I have it all printed out, and I read it, and it's hard to memorize, to say if you have this many ounces, but if you go, this is the penalty if you go over this ounce,
or if it's the second or the third or the fifth,
and it's like, okay, so people be careful out there, because you just don't know where you're going to end up, and so just be careful and make sure that you're lower than the limits, and hopefully we can eliminate all of that. Eliminate the confusion, let people live their lives, and make sure that people are getting pure stuff, so that they're not going to get contaminated.
Yeah, that's a great point that people don't bring up around the fentanyl crisis. So rather than, let's be radical here, rather than regulate drugs and make them, part of the commerce, that we can then also educate people on the pros and cons. We can test on things. There's no ban on medical testing, and at the same time, instead, we're going to keep it black market, and then worry about if our loved one is going to be the next person who got something that wasn't quite what they ordered. Because yes, there's some people out there that are like, I don't care if I die tonight. That's it, because they've reached that point. But other people were just trying to have a good time that night,
right?
And then it had to, and so
and
now basically, if there's a little, if there's a little corner of your paper and there's a trace amount of fentanyl on it, you're looking at a 5-year mandatory minimum, going back to the whole crack laws that we had to undo, over decades.
Right.
So I mean, there's so much ignorance around drugs, whether it be willful or just I don't know anything about it because I don't do drugs, or I don't know anyone who does drugs, and they do, but nobody wants to kind of own up to the world that we live in.
Right.
that is inundated with drugs. And whether we're going to get like something because our back hurts, or whether we're, drinking Red Bulls, crazily or something, like we're always trying to modify our bodies in some type of way. And it's shameful that we have this, these keep your hands off my body people, except when it's appropriate for them to put their hands all over your body and tell you what to do with it. So, well, one last thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about this interview, you served in the military, and I think I read somewhere that you were a small arms expert or something.
Yeah, I got my ribbon.
Okay. Yeah, my brother served for a long time too. So I would always talk to him a lot about like the culture, the people. I was always curious about like this, like it's his own country in a type of way of like people in service in the military.
Yeah.
And you kind of go all around, you raise your kid as a military brat, you yourself, get to know these people from all over the place, but you have this ideology or whatever. But just thinking about guns, and I've learned more about guns from people who've like served than anything. And just even this like thinking about guns, culture of guns, or what you use guns for, what you don't use guns for, the coolness of having a 1942, whatever. But this country is like really determined for black people not to have guns and white people to be armed to the teeth. And so like, how does the Second Amendment and gun control and racism kind of play out in the conversation around guns in Louisiana?
Well, I, think that, we have the Second Amendment, and I don't think it's going away. And I don't know if one day we'd be able to amend it, but get it back to what maybe the founders intended. But I think that guns are completely different now than when the law was written back in the day. So I think we need to adjust our strategy for dealing with the guns, okay? And I think it needs to be, across the board. We can have differences across races, things like that. But I would basically, everybody that owns a gun should have we should have universal background checks. And this is universal. No loopholes, no gun show loopholes, anybody.
What would they be checking for in the background checks?
They would be checking for past crimes with guns, okay? Criminal history, that kind of thing. Mental health history, and domestic violence, which is a really big thing, okay? Domestic violence is huge.
I've had, and just the other day, I was out shopping with my daughter, and this woman who was, I think she was moving into the quarter from, like another part of town where she was working, and she literally asked me if I thought she needed a gun. And it was an interesting conversation that we had, and she was a single woman, right, probably like 60, and really sweet. And, the thing that I think about, and you mentioned background checks, is like, whether she needs one or not, obviously it's based on her sense of like home security and safety, right?
Right.
I wouldn't pass such a background check. So my daughter and me are not entitled to that same safety.
She could.
Why is that?
She. How old is your daughter?
She's 14.
Okay, so you're saying that
we're not allowed to be safe.
Okay. Oh no, I think that it just depends on what you're. Again, this is the nitty gritty of the law. Okay, and so if you have a gun violation, then probably not. Okay, that's just kind of how it goes. If you don't have a gun violation, then yes. All right, but that's a legitimate question. But I also think for this lady that wants to have a gun and to protect herself, that she should get training, and that gun should be registered. So if, and I don't think it should be a permanent thing.
Like if I wasn't feeling safe, I couldn't register it, and I couldn't get training. But if I was feeling unsafe, living in a city that people constantly tell me is unsafe, and now if I'm a 15-year-old boy, I'm probably like the most unsafe for a reason. Right. Because maybe that other kid who's got a hot head, maybe I have a, like we're kids.
Right.
But like, why are the only people that are allowed to be safe are people that have never been in trouble?
No, I get your point, and that's a good point. But I do think that we should know that, people should know who is getting a gun, okay? And if somebody has a propensity to be violent,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the whole thing, the propensity to be violent.
Right.
So the criminal background check is not a blanket, denial of a gun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, has this guy killed a guy
Mm-hmm.
with a gun? Okay, and how long ago was that? And what was the circumstances of
Right.
So
But
that-
I mean,
that's
sadly
the issue.
though, it's been a blanket denial.
Okay.
And whether I hear it on the federal or local level, like I've never heard a politician, Republican or Democrat, and I'm sure it's happened, but I've just never heard it, say like we need to have more nuance to our background checks.
Yeah.
And these school shootings seem to never be done by someone who had a criminal record beforehand.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, like with the school shootings and the AR-15s and things. I again think those should be banned.
Mm.
And we had an assault weapons ban, and it worked, and it lowered those crimes, and I think we should do it again. I don't think it's unconstitutional. I think we can pass it if we had the political will, and if nothing else, raise the age limit, and then if nothing else, registered those guns. Those guns should be registered. No one should be walking out there without everybody's knowledge that somebody's got an AR-15. That's just, I think those guns should be registered. So I think there should be a lot of nuance in the law, especially when it comes to crime. The check is just the check. It doesn't say who can and who cannot own a gun. It's just a check, okay? Yeah. And then you make the laws.
Well, if you've been convicted of a felony, you can't have one.
So,
but and in this year, you're probably going to see. I mean, if you make it to up there, a real push for open carry, and we're going to go to Walmart. There's going to be 20 people
well,
with a
I've
gun
fought
on
against
their,
that. I've written an editorial on that. I don't want open carry, and I don't think it's a good thing. And I think we are just headed for more crime if we ever get that law passed.
Yeah, if I work in a gas station and someone comes in with a gun on their hip, how am I to assume that they're here to rob me, or they're just here to protect themselves in my gas station?
It's crazy, and every law enforcement agency in the state does not want this open carry law, and we have just people that push it because they think, we want the Wild Wild West or something. And
I think that was the line that was used. Senator Tarver, somebody was calling the just Wild West bill or whatever to the bill sponsor.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we don't want that.
But we're probably going to get it. So I do think, though, considering where the votes are and the lack of the veto power, the reality is some of us are going to have to decide, like, okay, well, what's the sort of counter move? And so whether you live in mid-city or whether you have that gas station or you live in
does everybody get a gun?
But also, like, how to, like if I own that gas station, and I put a sign up that said no open
guns.
Carry allowed,
Yeah.
well, am I going to get sued by the
Yes,
NRA?
Yes, you will.
So that's going to get interesting.
Yeah, it will. And hopefully it'll be solved and we won't have to go there. But there'll be a lot of lawsuits, and unfortunately there'll be a lot of gun violence that arises.
All right, so finally, I think an issue that everyone just kind of needs to hear touched on in some type of way is education. Here in New Orleans, we've had this charter school experiment for about 17 years. You mentioned that you went to a school that's still standing, right? Still graduating classes. You've probably gone back and spoken with people. My daughter's school has been around for 50 years. It's an arts school. But for a lot of these schools, they just kind of keep moving around, popping up, closing, whatever. You got CEOs making, $200,000, $500,000 that not even teaching. And the state seems to be moving towards this idea that, like, oh, let's do that everywhere.
Yeah.
What's the message to the state you would bring from District 23?
I would say let's not, again, profitize our children's education, and let's move back to local schools. Senator Bowie, Dr. Bowie, put forth a bill to go back to local schools. And I would go back to the school board having more say and power over the schools, and go back to having some traditional public schools. And, the charter schools, it's like, I don't know that they're going to go away, but I think they should be held to some standards, and right now there are none. So I think we need to standardize a lot of things. To make sure that all of our schools are getting the basic minimal curriculum and education they need, but also things that make the charter schools very difficult with the standardization is just the days off are not standardized, the school hours are not standardized, so bus drivers have a hard time, parents with more than one kid at a different school have a hard time. truant officers have a really hard time. They don't know if kids are supposed to be in school or out of school, depending on what school they go to and things like this. So just little things like that can be standardized, oversaw by the Orleans Public School System, school board, and then also standardizing some of the curriculum. And I still think that we have these specialty schools that are great, like the STEM schools and the art schools and the language schools that kids who want to have these different experiences get to do. But they also should have the standard curriculum to make sure that they're getting basic education so that they have the basic skills to get out and either get a job, go to a tech school, or go to college, one or the other, so that they have a future ahead of them. And right now, we're just not. We're not doing that on any front.
The thing that's puzzling, I think, for a lot of activisty people and parents is, once upon a time, everybody was singing the praises of charters and whether they were kind of in on the process or just like trying to marshal it through. Now you can't find anyone who supports it. And it's one of those things like, if nobody's for it, why do we still have it?
Well, because it's hard to get rid of now. Okay, because, after Katrina, the money just gushed in, and it looked, because the money was there, it looked like it was doing a good, it looked good. But once the dust settled, and then you had the proliferation of it all, because it's a money-making kind of thing, people are going to make money off of it, you had some bad actors in there. And so, it's like, okay, this is not all good, and we need to change. And so change is hard. And our schools weren't great before Katrina. So how do we recreate again a public school system that is going to be beneficial to all of our kids, And so that's the difficult thing. But I think moving back to a public school board that has some teeth, and to make sure that we're standardizing some things will be beneficial. And, the charter schools, we have parochial schools and we have private schools, and those should not be funded with, government, with
our dollars,
public funds. There's this, and they do okay with their funds from.
They're charging people, and they've got alumni that excited to keep them going.
That's what they need to be doing, and the charter schools can move that way if they want. Okay, but for our public schools, money. It should not be a money-making.
We're the ones paying for that, and we're giving them the profit. Like, we could be paying Y instead of X.
Yeah. This money should go to our kids and the resources that they need to be educated. So, again, whenever we have a for-profit endeavor, it's going to be the people who are making the profits who, get the money.
Yeah.
And the enterprise is not the main thing. So the enterprise, the educational enterprise, should be the main thing. That should be the source where the money goes, not.
I wonder how a bill would go if it was something to the effect of a charter school's like corporate structure has to be housed in the district where the charter school is, and its top whatever officials also have to be residents of that district. And then if one were just doing an analysis of the impact, I wonder what that would do to the charter school system here.
That would be interesting.
Because the point underlying would be like, look, if you live here in this district, you have a lot more responsibility towards these kids in this community.
Exactly.
And so like leadership should be local. And if the money is then also flowing out of the district in this big cut that's going somewhere else, it's not helping the community or nothing.
No, it's not. So.
All right, well, we touched on some of the key things. We could probably talk for a long time, but are there any kind of closing thoughts or something we haven't touched on that you want to share with people?
This has been a great race. It's been my honor to be here, so thank you for inviting me. And we have so many issues to tackle in our district, and I'm excited about the possibility of being at the Capitol and tackling those issues and continuing my service and making sure that I do everything I can to contribute to our city and everything. So I think we talked about the environment a little bit, but we really have to tackle our environmental crisis. It underlies everything that we do, and we can do so much more, and we must. So we didn't talk about that in detail, but okay, that's the only thing. Everything else we really covered a lot, so thank you so much, Bruce. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to serving the people. I'll look right to the county house. We really look forward to serving the people in District 23 and in our beloved city and in our state.
All right, well, early voting coming up November 3rd, election on November 18th. and Tammy Savoie. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you.
And I'm DJ Bruja, and we are out till the next episode.